This week on London Real, we have the only man to row solo across the Atlantic, climb Mount Everest, and cycle around the world, James Ketchell.
And I didn't do anything special, I just kept going. Rowing an ocean's got nothing to do with physical strength. It's all about mentally being in the right place. Human mind can adapt to things very quickly when you don't really have much choice. But Everest is a real leveler. Doesn't matter how much money you've got. It's all the same once you get up there. And if you honestly can put your head on your pillow at night when you go to bed and say, God, I did all that I could today, I guarantee you will make happen whatever you want to make happen.
London Real presents James Ketchell, Pushing the Limits.
Every human being is good at something.
This week on the show, we have Mr. James Ketchell, who is the only man who has rowed across the Atlantic, climbed Mount Everest, and cycled 18,000 miles around the world. But that's not what is awesome about him. What's awesome is his spirit and the way that he looks at these huge, insurmountable problems by breaking them down into tiny little pieces that anyone can accomplish. And when he talked about rowing the Atlantic, he said, Brian, all I had to do was get halfway across, because then I know it's like coming down a mountain, I can get the other half. And he's like, when I had to cycle the world, all I know is I need to do 100 miles, and then I have to do that 180 times. And it's just the way he looks at these big problems that I think makes him such a special guy. He's super humble. He was actually crippled in a motorcycle accident in 2007, said he would never walk correctly again, and yet pushed through to accomplish these great feats. In a way, he actually used that injury to inspire him to accomplish these great things. And his most recent adventure, he rode the Indian Ocean with someone with epilepsy. And so it was a huge potential major drama doing that. But he was caught in this huge storm, was rescued by an oil tanker, and barely survived. He tells the whole story on this interview. And he's just a guy that just keeps pushing on. Like I said, super spiritual, super humble. I think we can learn a lot about what it's like to be a human in this crazy world and this crazy thing we call life by listening to James. I was utterly surprised and just pleasantly enjoyed this conversation. He's not that tough ex-SAS guy that needs to accomplish all these hardcore things in the world. He's a normal guy doing abnormal and amazing things. So enjoy the time here with James. You know, a lot of you have stopped me on the streets, grabbed me on the tube, and come up to me late at night and said, Brian, what is the London Real Academy all about? And you know, it's 1,000 of the most hardcore London Reelers from around the world that are getting together to build better versions of themselves and to accomplish goals they never thought were imaginable. I love this so much. We've been doing it now for just over 6 months. And this is a place where you can come to watch live episodes, to watch premium content like our success secrets, to watch webinars with me, and also to come. It's a social network where we get together with each other. We post videos about inspiration, about problems we're having, and we also meet up in cities all across the world. I've been to meetups in San Francisco. We have them in New York, Toronto, Australia, Paris, Berlin, and in our studios right here at London Real up there. Every 2 weeks you can book one, come to a focus group. We spend 3 hours. We talk about what you want to accomplish in your life, who we can pair you up in the academy to be your accountability partner and to get things done. It's just incredible what we're doing, the things we're learning from you, and the progress we're making, and it's just gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger. So come, jump in, get involved. I made a quick 3-minute video to tell you what it's all about. Check it out.
The entrepreneurial journey, it can be a lonely road. I push myself in so many areas, but you know, you can't do it all yourself.
The thing about the academy is, it's like, look, you have the ideas, you have the ability, you have the skill, and you have the sort of ambition for yourself. But when you have a group of people pulling you forward, it's so important.
Accountability is what's missing from most of the programs or any gurus or any internet mentor that I had before.
I wanted to get some accountability. I wanted to make myself accountable to a group, to you.
The reason we started the Academy is because I felt like we were doing these amazing talks, like we'd have a Peter Sage episode or a Dan Pena episode or a Kala or someone, and you get super inspired, and then YouTube stops, and then you go back to your life and you don't make any changes. And it was just like, it felt like, what are we doing? If you're designing your life right, the good times are now. And in a few years, you'll look back and say, wow, that was amazing.
The thing about the Academy is it has so many different sort of layers to it. I think your web seminars are awesome. The way you broke it down and the style of your teaching is pretty awesome.
I like the feed. When I have to motivate myself, I kind of look at others struggling and getting over those struggles. So I actually follow daily the feed.
Best feature would be the sort of Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, as in creating a profile with your goals, your dreams.
Everyone's on the same vibe, and we may be at different stages in our journeys, but everyone's on the same page at the end of the day. Everyone's really trying to push themselves and building the best you. It really resonates with me.
And the fact that I'm committing a small amount of money and the fact that I'm actually trying to interact with those people means that I'm invested and means that I will keep it for the long run.
You have to be serious about yourself and what you want to achieve. And if you're serious about yourself, this is going to be such a fantastic platform.
London Real, sponsored by Bulletproof. This is London Real. I am Brian Rose. My guest today is James Ketchell, who is a serial adventurer, motivational speaker, and scouting ambassador, who in 2014 became the first and only person to row across the Atlantic Ocean, successfully summit Mount Everest, and cycle 18,000 miles around the world. James, welcome to London Real.
Thank you for having me. What an intro. That made me sound quite amazing, didn't it?
You are amazing.
I'm really not, but thank you for having me.
You know, I want to get into it because I want the details about Everest. I've actually never had anyone on the show that's actually summited, so I want to get into that. Yeah. I want to talk about rowing across the ocean, which you did solo to the Atlantic, and you've been attempting now with your partner with epilepsy across the Indian Ocean. We'll talk about that, not to mention cycling around the world. But when you walked in here, you have a noticeable limp because your ankle still has issues.
Interesting you picked that up.
Yeah, I noticed that. And of course, I had read about your bio, but in 2007, you had a motorcycle accident, broke both your legs. You were told that you wouldn't be walking for some time and maybe never been walking. So before we get into all this incredible stuff you do, I was wondering if you could take me back to like 2007. You I don't know, do you wake up in a hospital bed, they're telling you this bad news, and you're thinking to myself, I don't know, my life has really changed for the worse. You know, what was going through your head?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I was accelerating quite hard out of a corner. Bike was kind of leant over, and I sort of almost had my knee down, sort of sliding on the floor, and I just put a little bit too much power down, and all of a sudden the rear wheel span up, so it lost traction. And the back of the bike came round on me, and it threw me over the top of the handlebars. I think I was traveling at about 115 miles an hour at the time. And it's funny because I remember just flying through the air, looking back at the bike, and all of a sudden things just totally slowed down. It's just your senses are all of a sudden massively heightened. And I was looking back at the bike, flying through the air, and I just thought, oh, this is going to hurt. And I just remember I hit the deck hard, and it just knocked me clean out. then the next thing I remember, I was at the side of the track, and I couldn't breathe. I was heavily winded, and I had this really intense pain in my lower right leg. And a doctor came running over, and the first thing he said to me was, "Don't look down." And what do you do when you're told not to do something? You look down. So my right foot, instead of it pointing forwards, I'd actually snapped the ankle, and it was 180 degrees behind me. And just sort of looking at it, I was like, it just hurt that little bit more. And but I was quite pleased actually, because I still had a sense of humour in the face of adversity. The doctor slid the boot off, and that morning I'd put a white sock on, and I had an open fracture, so the skin had split. And my white sock was now dripping red with blood. And I said to the guy, "Hey, you don't have a camera on you, I've got a phone, that would make a great picture." And he was like, "Stop being such a silly boy." I said, I'm sorry, okay. Next thing I know, I'm in quite a lot of pain. And they start injecting morphine into me, which is this incredible drug. You just drift away into another world, lose the ability to speak. And it was quite sort of euphoric, actually. Next thing I know, I wake up in hospital. I'd snapped my ankle, and I'd broken my legs and my arm and my hand. So I'm literally, apart from my left arm, I'm in like a full cast, and you can't do a thing. You've got to have a nurse. I literally had a nurse washing me, so it wasn't all bad in some respects. And it was a real wake-up call, actually. I remember the guy who operated, it was 3 different doctors that operated on me. And one of them said, look, he came in a couple of days after I was still lying in bed. I always used to think I was kind of a bit of a Superman, but I found out that I certainly wasn't. And he said, look, you're probably going to struggle to walk properly again, let alone race your bikes. And I was quite active at the time as well. And that really hit me quite hard, actually. It certainly put things into perspective. I mean, I was lucky I still had legs, but I'd smashed them up quite badly.
How old were you when this happened?
I think I was about 25.
And what was 25-year-old James kind of doing with his life? And, if you hadn't had that accident, I'm guessing you wouldn't have necessarily summited Everest and done all these other things.
Well, that's interesting. I've always had this dream to try and row a boat across the Atlantic Ocean, but I don't know why. I've never had the balls to do it and just push myself outside of my comfort zone. Because I think the hardest part about doing anything is making that commitment, is actually saying, I'm going to do this, and putting yourself on the line. And I never really had the guts to do that. So I think when I was young, I used to watch a program called Tintin, which is a fictional character. He used to go on adventures. And I always wanted to be Tintin. And I think that's where the whole adventure thing has kind of stemmed from. But at the time I was working, and I was working as an account manager for a big American company, actually. And the money I was earning from that was paying to race motorbikes. And I was really quite happy. I also worked as a part-time gym instructor. So every weekend or every Saturday, I'd work in a gym and usually race and ride bikes on a Sunday. And things were actually going quite well. And then one day, boom, just had that accident. But I kind of laugh and joke and say, actually, I fell into a better life. Well, it's not necessarily better, just different.
And you think that gave you the motivation to actually start doing some of the dreams that you had?
Oh yeah, I remember I was lying there, and the doctor said, "Look, you are going to be lucky to walk properly again, and it's going to take at least 6 months to get to the point where you can walk again." And I thought I needed something to aim for. I needed a reason as to why I was going to do all my physio and make the effort. Because if I don't work towards a goal, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit lost. That's just the way I am. I have to be working towards something. And I thought, that is what I'm going to do. I am going to row across the Atlantic. And as soon as I got out of hospital, I started working on it. In fact, I started working on the project in hospital. I had a laptop. I started making to-do lists. I started trying to build a website. The first one wasn't very good, but someone else helped me with it in the end. And yeah, I started profiling companies. The hardest part about any expedition is getting to the start line. So I'm thinking, well, how am I gonna find the money to make this happen? And I started immediately.
So no weeks of depression, no.
No, I was really lucky. I didn't really get that depressed as such. There were times when I kind of felt sorry for myself, but I thought, I don't know what it was, that something just told me, this is what you have to do now. You need to make an effort, and you never, ever, ever. I mean, my dad used to tell me when I was young, never, ever feel sorry for yourself, because there's always someone else out there who is not doing so well as you, or there'll always be someone who's doing better than you, and just do your own thing, never get too down when things don't go so well. And time went really quickly, actually.
How many years was it until you were, in the Canary Islands getting ready to row across the Atlantic solo?
It's about 3 years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 3 years.
And how long did it take you to rehab and kind of get out of the hospital and get back? And
It took about 6 months to be able to walk properly again.
Wow.
So it's quite a long time. I would have physio every week on my ankle and on my legs. But actually it was quite addictive because I saw myself getting stronger as time went on. And I thought, well, if I just keep doing this one thing and doing my exercises, it seems to be working for me. And the stronger I got, and I was quite a fit guy anyway because I worked in a gym and my whole life was kind of training and stuff. So I think that really helped with the recovery that when I did have the accident, I was actually quite a fit young man. And that certainly did stand me in good stead. And actually I was going down the gym, after my arm recovered the quickest.
Okay.
But I still had a cast on my leg actually. And I started going down the gym just lifting really light dumbbells, just doing some exercises whilst I still had my leg in a cast and stuff. So immediately I started to try and exercise and because for me it was doing these exercises and trying to get to the gym and doing all the things I knew I had to do. It gave me that routine, it gave me that structure, and everyone's different, but I have to have some kind of routine, some kind of structure, some kind of discipline. And actually it was going back years ago before I even had the accident. I used to be quite a skinny, spotty little kid, teenager. Most kids are, aren't they? And I had zero confidence, I mean zero. And I found the gym and it was sort of lifting weights and getting fitter. I figured out how I could actually change my body to a certain degree. And it was that gave me more confidence and gave me the discipline and the routine and the structure. And that helped in my preparations for the expeditions, actually, in the end.
It's fascinating how, like, when you have that accident and all of a sudden your options are severely limited, that can actually get you excited and give you goals.
Yeah.
And now you say you were addicted to the rehab. I mean, it says a lot about a mindset, because a lot of people would take something less tragic as a reason to quit on their lives. And yet you use these new constraints as a new challenge to be more successful.
Well, I thought, how can I... See, most human beings are programmed to think, and it's only natural, I can't really do that. I can't do that because of X, Y, Z. But if you stop and think, well, actually, it doesn't look like I can do it, but if I break this down, how can I get there? How can I make this happen? What do I need to do in order to make that happen, or to get that, or to be the best at whatever I'm doing? There's always a way if you figure it out and you kind of think about it. And first of all, I needed to walk again, so that was quite important. So I had, highly prioritized that. And then I broke the road down into sort of different pillars. I had the finances. I could be the fittest guy out there, but if I had no money to buy the boat, it's useless. Nothing's going to happen. So that was a big part of my focus, was looking at how I can pull the money together to make this row happen. And then, the next kind of pillar was fitness. And then the next pillar was logistics and technical equipment. How do you buy an ocean rowing boat? How do you know what you're doing? When you're out in the middle of an ocean, where are you going to get your water from? You can't take enough to go across. So you've got to understand all of this equipment that you're going to use. You need to know how to navigate. And the rowing is the easiest part of it. Any monkey can sit on a seat and pull the oars. You've got to be an electrician. I remember when I crossed, my water maker broke, so I lost the ability to turn salt water into drinking water. Major problem when you're slap bang in the middle of an ocean and the closest people to you are 230 miles above you in the International Space Station orbiting the Earth. You can't call the AA or the RIC. You got to figure out how I can deal with this. So there are so many different elements of ocean rowing that I just love. Yeah.
It sounds like you're great at breaking down big problems into little problems.
You have to.
And solving them. And that sounds like your specialty.
It works.
It's funny because when I've watched interviews with you, before you cycled around the world, first you're like, I'm going to cycle across America. Yeah. And then you're like, when I'm going to cycle across America, I'm going to do 120 miles a day, and I'm going to do it like this. And then you're very good at breaking, like I said, a big thing down a little thing, when most people would quit when they hear the big problem. Like, no, I can't do that. But you seem to get excited about all of those details.
Yeah, and naturally that worked for me, because I remember I broke the Atlantic down into, I looked at it as a mountain, which is very bizarre considering I went out to Everest in the end. And I thought, if I could get to the halfway point, for me, that halfway point is the summit. All I've got to do is come down the other side and I'm closer to where I want to be as opposed to where I've left. And if anything goes wrong, the chances are you're going to get recovered and towed into the Caribbean anyway. So all you got to do is get to that halfway point. And actually, once you get to that point, the currents strengthen and it pulls you in.
Okay.
So I was like, if I can just get to that halfway point, I have done it. Because I remember when I was stood in La Gomera, which is in the Canary Islands where I started, looking out, and it was a particularly rough day, massive waves smashing over the harbour wall and stuff, and I just thought, what the hell have I let myself in for? But I thought, okay, calm down. It's a bad day today, there's a lot of wind and the seas are big, but tomorrow's a new day. And sure as hell, tomorrow was a really lovely, calm day. And I thought the first few days were the most important because you just kind of can succumb to seasickness and the reality hits you like a train, what you're about, what you're trying to do.
Yeah, it's dangerous.
See, when you're chatting with your friends in the pub, I'm about to row an ocean, it all sounds very glorious and great. But when you're out there on your own, because no one would do this with me. So I wanted to do it with someone else and no one would join me. So I thought, I'm going to do this on my own. Best decision I ever made.
Why?
I think the reason it was probably the best decision I ever made is because it made me, actually. I was kind of a relatively confident guy beforehand, but when I really did finish that row, and I didn't do anything special, I just kept going. I had this kind of mindset that if I'm in this massive ocean and it's a big place, if I just keep rowing, but obviously don't row in circles, just keep going, by default, I'm going to get to land. I will run out of ocean. You have to. I may not get where I want to be, but I will get across this ocean if I do one thing. That one thing is just to keep going. And that's all I did. And that theory, that mindset is how I think about things. Everything I do, I think back to that mindset because that got me to Antigua. And I think had I rowed with someone else, maybe, I don't know that I would have found out that actually if you just keep going and you're determined, you'll get there in the end. I think, and it made me realise that actually I am fairly self-sufficient.
Yeah, big confidence
survive.
booster when you do that.
And it was that really, and then when I got home and other things, with work or whatever I was doing seemed a bit difficult, I thought, you nuts. You spent nearly 4 months rowing across the Atlantic on your own. There's nothing you can't do now.
Right.
If you go back to that concept of just keep plugging away, keep going.
It sounds like a great way to deal with life. Like if you know my long-term goal is this, I know that if I go this way, I will get there. So today, let's not get emotional about it. Let's just focus on getting that little bit. And then that's what we do the next day and the next day.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
and it's funny because when I went out to Everest, my goal, I never thought about summiting until I was actually leaving Camp 4 and on the way to the summit. My goal was to arrive at base camp as fresh and as healthy as I could. There's a lot of infections, people coughing and spluttering, and people get sick out there. And then I thought, well, so I did arrive at base camp healthy. Then my next goal was to get through the Khumbu Icefall, which is the most dangerous part of the climb, in one piece.
Right.
And then I did do that. And then it was like, okay, right, well now I've got to figure out how can I get up to Camp 2, Camp 3. And the only time I thought about the summit was when I was at Camp 4, and it was 11 o'clock at night and we were leaving, climbing through the night to get up to the summit in the morning and come back down again. Okay. I never ever thought about the summit.
And is that mental discipline or is that just the way you think?
I don't know, I'm not really sure if it's mental discipline. Okay. I know that there's no such thing as the right way to think. It's all very individual, and I know what works for me. And when you find out what works for you, you take that and you run with it and you use that. Right. Everyone else is different. We're all so different, aren't we?
You said about the rowing, like anyone can row.
Anyone could step in a boat tomorrow and row an ocean.
But most people would disagree with you. They would be like, I can't do that.
And I would highly disagree with them.
Right.
And I would say that you could, if you believe in yourself and you have that mindset that actually, because even if you've never rowed in your life, that doesn't matter. You've got 3,000 miles to learn how to row. And trust me, when you're rowing for 12 hours a day, you soon learn how to row. And you know what? If you've never rowed, then you just do an hour. Then the next day you do 2 hours and you just build up.
Right.
And actually when I left the Canary Islands, I think for the first couple of days, I wasn't actually rowing 12 hours a day. I started off about 8 or 9 and I think within the first week I was doing 12 to 13 hour days on the oars actually rowing.
Okay.
They're just easy peasy.
You just got into it the more
You just get into it. You get into it, yeah.
I want to hear all about Everest, but what's it like?
no worries.
What's it like, say, day 10 in the middle of the Atlantic? You're alone. You know, you haven't probably stood up in a long time. You've got some communication, maybe via email and a satellite. I don't know if you did back in 2010.
Yes,
maybe.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Do you like being alone out there? Do you find it's a time where you're introspective and it's peaceful, or are you thinking, I want to get home and talk to people?
I loved it, and you've got to enjoy it. If you fight it, because I'm traveling so slowly, and I'm averaging like 2 knots, which is walking pace. You'd walk faster, you know. So it took a long time to get across, but you've got to enjoy it. You're out there in this environment. Every day the sun comes up, the water glistens in a different way. The wildlife is something you've never experienced. Huge big fin whales swimming up to the side of the boat. And I was looking eye to eye with these whales. You can't do that in captivity. And the sharks would follow me and swim around the boat. I'd throw food in to get them to come closer so I could film them. I used to get out of
Throw food at the sharks.
I thought it was incredible. They were actually called oceanic white-tip sharks, and they were 7-8 foot sharks. They're big sharks, but they were not scary at all. And I thought, well, I want to try and get some photos of these things, but they would never come close enough. So I started throwing bits of food in to get them to come close, and they never, ever would. And I had this theory that I could literally jump in and they'd swim off, and I decided not to try it in the end. But
maybe some blood would have been good. You just
yeah, absolutely. And I tried to fish, and the fish were so smart, they kept taking the bait off the hook. I couldn't believe it. So actually the trick is you need a harpoon gun. You can spear them very, very easily. But I used to get out of the boat and to clean the bottom of the hull, because you get growth build up on the bottom of the hull. So by keeping it clean, you can gain just half a knot. So if you think that half a knot over every hour, over every day, over every week, that small marginal gain becomes massive. And when I remember, I used to tie myself on and get out the boat, and I'd look down and it would go dark. It was unreal. It was so clear. It's 3 miles to the bottom. So you're never that far from land. It's just the wrong way. And there's an incredible ecosystem of fish that swim underneath the boat, and they're actually hiding from the sun, which is quite intense out in the middle of the Atlantic. And of course, then you get bigger fish coming up to eat the smaller ones and so on. And before you know it, you've got an entire ecosystem of fish swimming around your boat. It's amazing. And I remember one day I was cleaning the bottom of the hull and a fish came right up to me, bit me on the nipple. Couldn't believe I'd been bitten on the nipple in the middle of an ocean. But it wasn't painful. It's like being pinched. But
are you ever scared for your life out there? Or you ever have a realization like I could die? You know, I know sometimes these boats sometimes don't know you're there and will just come plowing.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. I was almost run over by a 300-meter long tanker. And it sounds crazy, I didn't see it coming. You're rowing away and you're in your own world. You listen to your iPod, and the trick is to use the time constructively. So I used to think about all the things I wanted to do when I got home, and I used to make a list and write things down, and I'd think in great detail about how I'm going to do something. And I remember there was one particular day I was rowing away, and it's a silence out there on a calm day when there's no water lapping against the boat. It's a silence that you've never experienced before. And all of a sudden I heard this very loud mechanical noise out of nowhere above my iPod, which I was listening to. And I thought, what the hell is that? And I turned round and I was just greeted by this huge tanker coming straight towards me, and it hadn't seen me and I didn't even realize. And I grabbed a VHF radio, which is what you use to communicate with other vessels. And my boat was called Speedo. I got sponsored by Speedo, the swimming trunk people. And I said, look, this is Speedo. I'm on your bow, so the front of their boat. And they were about to run me over. And I said, can you see me? And I got nothing. So no one was monitoring the radio. And I thought, well, I've got to do something myself. And I managed to steer myself away, and it passed me to within about 50 meters, which doesn't sound that close. But when you're in a boat that's maybe, I think it's 5-6 meters long, and their vessel is 300 meters long and weighs 100,000 tons, it's a different ballgame altogether. And the wake actually almost rolled the boat over, but luckily it was never really a problem. But my heart had never leapt out my chest like that before. And that's the most dangerous part.
Okay, is the other vessels.
Yeah, it's other human beings, sharks, waves. I mean, you'll see, it's not uncommon to be caught in seas that are as high as a 2 or 3 story building, but the boat will self-right itself if it rolls over.
Okay.
So as long as you're still in it, you'll be fine.
Okay. So those don't scare you as much. Okay. And
it's
besides,
getting run down.
when you're out there alone and the sea is going, you're never thinking I might die now, or did you get so used to it where you're like you convinced yourself I wasn't going to die?
It's amazing actually, because the human body, the human mind, can adapt to things very quickly when you don't really have much choice.
Like wartime situations.
Yeah,
or...
I just, there I was out in this ocean, and all of a sudden I started to love it. The first few days, the reality hit me hard, but I couldn't let the people down that had sponsored me to make this happen, and the people I was raising money for, when so many people had turned me away. These few people, a few companies helped me make this trip happen. And I said to my parents before I got in the boat, I said, the only time I will get out of this boat is if it's sinking. And thankfully it didn't sink. And if it does sink, I'll get into the life raft and I'll figure out how to keep going, because I am not going to give up. And I was just lucky, the boat never sank, and never needed to get into the life raft, and I was able to get across, really. Yeah.
Did part of you never want to get to land?
Well, it's funny you say that, because it took 110 days and 4 hours and 4 minutes to get across.
110 days, okay.
Yeah. And I expected it to take maybe between 70 and 90 days. So I took 100 days worth of food thinking, oh, that'll be fine. But I realized very quickly that a human being is powerless in the middle of an ocean, because when the winds change and you get blown back, there's nothing you can do. And a good description of what it's like is, imagine being on a roller coaster and it's really scary and you're getting flown all over the place and you're screaming, but no one will ever stop the ride. That's what it's like being out in the middle of an ocean. It's like being on a roller coaster ride.
Right, so you got to stop. You can't fight it.
You can't. So you go with it and you just get used to it, and you stay calm and don't. Panic will kill you.
Okay.
And if you don't panic, you start to think, well, hey, maybe this isn't so bad. After a couple of days, you've got used to the motion, so the boat's moving all over the place, but you don't even realize it anymore. You've got used to it. You've found your sea legs effectively. And it's like, yeah, it's not that bad. Bring it on.
Okay, but you were running out of food.
Yeah, I ran out of food 230 miles from Antigua.
Okay.
And that is when I found out what it was like to be truly starving. And it's funny, actually, because I never use the word starving ever anymore. Because when you experience what it's like to be starving, it's not very pleasant. I mean, it's great character building, and I can look back on it now, but it was not nice at the time.
What's it like, especially when because your destiny is based on your caloric output, because you have to row.
Yeah, of course. Now, to be honest, it was probably my fault that I ran out. I did try to ration the food. The reason I ran out of food was because I was caught in a storm for 2 weeks and it pushed me back. And there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to keep going when the winds do eventually change. But of course, that had a knock-on effect closer to Antigua. And I tried to continue rowing for a couple of days, but you just can't. You just fall apart mentally and physically. My gums were bleeding, my nails were lifting up, and my body was literally falling apart.
Because you hadn't eaten.
Yeah, and I was stupidly still trying to row.
Okay, you just had water.
Yeah, I just had water. I never ran out of water. I always had water on board, so enough water.
Do you lose your mental capacity? Do you start getting
you
irrational, loopy, irritable?
Yeah, you can. You mentally, you can fall off the rails, and that's not good. Because rowing in ocean's got nothing to do with physical strength. It's all about mentally being in the right place, enjoying it, embracing it. Because it was years ago now that I rowed across the Atlantic, and it's a distant memory. It's only like now when I talk about it, do the thoughts and the certain scenarios that I found myself in come back to me. So the trick is to just enjoy it, because nothing is forever.
Okay, now the starvation. So your gums start bleeding, your fingers start bleeding. What do?
I had no choice. I was lucky. I had a satellite phone, and I used that to call someone in Antigua who I knew was there. And they sailed out and met me and dropped some food off.
Okay.
And it was that enabled me to carry on. And I thought, well, I'm lucky because I have the facility to call someone on a phone who's effectively coming to my rescue. But it kind of made me think at the time, there are so many people out there that are starving that don't have that luxury of calling someone on a satellite phone to bring them their food, and really put things into perspective when I run out of food over that week, actually.
And if you had to describe what that starvation feeling was like, how would you describe it?
Your stomach it sort of swells up, and you get, it's a level of hunger that you've never experienced before. and you lose all motivation, you lose all strength, you lose the ability to think, and it's massively debilitating, actually.
I remember hearing some testimonials from some of the British soldiers who were in the bridge over the River Kwai, those kind of guys, and they were so starved when they were working on that project, and they used to say all they would do is sit around and just talk about food. Like they were.
I used to do that as well.
Because they said forget talking about girls. Or it was just like they would just talk about food, and that's all they could think about.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was in satellite communication with my parents back at home, and when I ran out of food, I was still talking to them, and we have quite a bit of banter or whatever you want to call it with my parents. They're my best friends. We're very close. And my dad would tease me. I would ring him up and he'd say, James, I'm just in a Chinese restaurant and the food is beautiful. And he would send me pictures, because I could receive very small pictures. And he'd send me photos of the food that he was eating out with my mom in the restaurant.
It's like not funny.
Yeah, but I suppose it helped me. That got me through it. And I used to think about all the things. And I had this really bizarre craving for a BLT sandwich. Where it came from is just beyond me. But yeah.
That's a strange scenario that you can be like under email communication when you're maybe out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, well, the satellite phone doubles up as a modem, so it gives you a very basic internet connection.
Okay.
Enough to kind of communicate with
and
people.
Are you really a phone call away from getting help? Like in a couple days, will they be able to find you? Or
because I can relay my position to someone who's coming
someone
out.
will come get you?
Depending on where you are. Then don't forget, I was quite close.
Okay.
So it only took a couple of days for a yacht to sail out and drop. And I'd been out there for a long time as well.
Okay.
So this person knew that I needed some help.
Okay.
I guess I would have eventually arrived, but what sort of state I would have been in is beyond me.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was... anyone who rows across the Atlantic and arrives into Antigua in a place called English Harbour, Nelson's Dockyard, there's a particular hotel. And anyone who manages to successfully row across gets a free meal. So I row in and they say, "Sir, what would you like?" And I said, "I'd actually like a cheeseburger with some fries, and I'd like an ice cold Coke, because I've got no way of keeping things cold. So just having the ice and a nice cold, refreshing drink was just like heaven." So he said, "No problem, sir." And so I remember he went away and he brought out the Coke and the ice, and it was like, it was lovely, so cold. And then he brought out the cheeseburger on a plate with the sort of silver thing over the top of it, and he put it in front of me and he pulled the lid off, and there it was. I was like, wow, almost 4 months I've been dreaming of having something like this, right? And I bit into this burger, and the burger was stone cold. They'd served me this stone cold burger after 4 months of rowing, kind of visualizing what it was going to be like. I was like, oh, it's cold. But I still ate it. I mean, it actually tasted quite good, even though it was cold. And then I got back to my accommodation that I was staying in, and I don't know if any of you remember, back in 2010 in April, that was when a massive volcano erupted and it chucked an ash cloud up into the sky.
Yeah.
So it grounded flights all the way around the world. So my parents weren't even in Antigua when I arrived. Their flight was cancelled. But it happened to be Antigua Race Week, which is basically when all these rich Americans sail around the island in their yachts and race. And when the word got out that this lunatic from Britain who'd been on his own for 4 months was about to row in, it was unbelievable, the support that I had. You know, guys were coming up to me saying, "Can my wife have a photo with you?" It doesn't happen anymore for some reason, but I'll never forget that. And that evening, a guy showed me to go, book me into a hotel. Never met the guy before. And he said, "You can stay here." And I was dreaming of having a nice hot shower, because it's the simple things you miss when you're out in an ocean. Having a nice clean clothes, the smell of a fresh t-shirt or a shirt that's just come out of the tumble dryer or whatever, nice food and a clean shower.
Okay. Bathroom,
and all that kind of stuff. And so I thought, I'm going to spend an hour under this shower, right? So I get into this shower and I turn it on, and it's just this trickle coming out, and it's stone cold, and I'm like, no, I've just had a cold cheeseburger, and now the shower that I'd been dreaming of for so long is appalling. But it made me laugh, and I'll never forget that.
I had a rower on the show about a year ago, and he had, I think, rowed with a partner across the Indian Ocean, and he said when he got to the destination, a bunch of people came out to the beach and greeted him.
Yeah, that's quite common.
He got out and did that, and once he said hi, he said he actually went back into the boat and went inside and wanted to be alone. And I was wondering if you felt any kind of strangeness being in a social environment after that.
Well, I can tell you a really funny story about that, actually. I arrived, and where it was Antigua Race Week, there were parties going on, and I knew a couple of people on the island. And, I'd spent 4 months on my own. But that night, I did eventually get a proper shower, and I borrowed someone's clothes, because I had no clothes, like decent clothes that you could wear out. And that evening, I found myself in a club with hundreds of people everywhere, and it was really quite surreal. I still had the big beard, and people knew that it was me. I just rode across. So people were trying to buy me beers and stuff, and it was really surreal. Thinking, well, actually, 12 hours ago, I was still on my own, just rowing in, and had been on my own for the last 4 months, and now I'm here. There's people all around me. It was very, very odd, actually. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. And it's something that really made me laugh. The DJ, this kind of Afro-Caribbean sort of chap, got on the mic and was like, hey, I just want to give a big shout out to James Ketchell, who spent 4 months rowing across the Atlantic. He's in here tonight, ladies. And I'm like, oh, that was funny. And all of a sudden, the guy just came out with this quote. He was like, James, your balls must be massive. Let's hope you can get that sorted out, ladies. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, did that guy just say that? And I'm stood there in the middle and everyone's looking at me. It was bizarre. It was crazy. Yeah.
Did that work out for you?
It was crazy time. Yeah.
Let's talk about Everest. I want to talk about you're a serial adventurer, and I can kind of tell by being around you. But I can tell by being around you that you always need a mission, right? And I know next year you're gonna pedal boat across the Atlantic. I want to talk about that. I know you might go on a third attempt with your partner across the Indian Ocean. Your partner with epilepsy. I want to talk about that. And it sounds like a healthy way to live, to always have projects on the horizon. I think a lot of people don't do that with their lives. So I want to get to that. But I think you're the first London Real guest that summited Everest. And we all hear about Everest. We always hear about some people that did it. And then sometimes you hear about Playboy bunnies doing it or old people doing it. But I really want to know, what is it really like? And I want to know, why did you decide to do it? Is it hard to arrange an expedition like that? I know it's not cheap. And then this mindset that you talked about earlier, where you're not thinking about the summit the whole time, because I'm guessing that the reason you want to summit can affect whether you live, whether you die, whether you enjoy it, whether you hate it. Because some people, if they just want to take a picture and tell their friends about it, it might change the whole thing. So that's a lot of questions. That's what I do here. But tell me about Everest.
So what I can do is I'll tell you what it was like for me, because I think everyone has a different experience out there. For me, it was amazing. And there's a very stereotypical image that rich playboys go out and climb it. I didn't meet anyone like that. The guys that I met out there had remortgaged their houses, had worked tirelessly for years to get to the start line, and it was incredible. But how it actually came about, it was during my preparations for the Atlantic Row that I met another guy who was also rowing across the Atlantic, obviously in a different boat and a slightly different time. And he was a 5-time Everest summiter. And we just connected, became good friends. I helped him work on his project and he helped me. And he was very academic. He was a very intelligent doctor, but he wasn't really that practical. And I was quite practical with the boat. So we just kind of became good friends. And he said, James, after the row, do you fancy going out to Everest with me? And I said, well, look, I'd love to, but let's just take one thing at a time. I'd climbed before, but not to that kind of level. And it was always in the back of my mind, potentially going out to Everest, but I sort of tried to concentrate on the task in hand, getting across. And I got across, and I remember the phone rang when I was back home. It was my friend Rob, and he said, oh, are you coming out to Everest? And my instant reaction was to say, yeah. So I said, yep, I'm in. I knew I had to do it. And he said, great, you got 6 months to find £30,000. And I was like, God, how am I going to raise that kind of money? I don't know. But it was then that I thought back, well, hang about. I just spent 4 months rowing across the Atlantic, and all I did was just keep going, and it got me across the Atlantic. So if I take that mindset, if I take that concept and apply it to fundraising, surely someone is going to say yes at some point. And that is when I just hit the phones almost every day. I actually took a big risk here because I was still working when I got back from the Atlantic. And it was very difficult to work full time and raise the funds. So I thought, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I sold everything I owned and I moved back in with my parents to reduce my overheads. And I decided that I was going to quit my job and full time I was going to try and raise money to get out to Everest. So that's what it was a massive risk really, but that's what I did. And it's quite funny because I said to my boss, I didn't want to leave my job, but I said, can I have a few more months off to go out to climb Everest? And he said, are you mad? We've just given you 6 months off to row across the Atlantic. And his actual words were, on your bike, son. Which is, I thought was quite ironic considering I did end up cycling the world. So I just thought, right, okay, I'm going to move back in with my parents and go and live at home and do this. And every day I was picking up the telephone, making hundreds of calls, sending hundreds of emails out. That's the reality. That is what you have to do to get to the start line. Right. You know, people see you out on Everest or rowing across an ocean, they think, whoa, this guy must be quite wealthy. Oh, he's so lucky. But they actually don't see the months and months of making those calls, and the rejection you get is massively demoralizing. I mean, really demoralizing. But all of a sudden I got a lucky break one day. I was chatting to a guy who worked at Ben Sherman. They make quite good shirts. And he said, look, I can't sponsor you, but what I can do for you is give you this spreadsheet, and there's 300 different CEO, managing director email addresses on this spreadsheet. Why don't you just spam every single one of them, but don't mention I gave it to you? And I'm like, yeah, great. And I emailed all of them and mostly got rejections back. And it came to the last one, and it was this guy called Andrew, who was the marketing director of a company called Nando's, who make great chicken burgers. And I thought, I don't know if I'm going to bother sending this email because I don't really see the connection between Nando's and me climbing Everest. And I was so close to just not sending it, but I thought, what is this stupid? The email's already pre-written. I've literally just got to put the guy's name in it. So I typed Andrew into the bit and I sent it off and I forgot about it. And literally half an hour later, the phone rang and it was Andrew, and his exact words were, James, I've just got your email. This is bloody wicked. But tell me one thing, do you actually eat Nando's?
To watch the rest of this fascinating interview, click on the link below and go to londonrealacademy.com. There you can sign in with your social media login and watch the rest of the episode for free, along with all of our episodes on London Real, my webinars, and all of our premium content, all located over at londonrealacademy.com. So click on the link below. You'll be directed there and you can watch the rest of this fascinating interview, and I'll see you there.